Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephanie Toddy from ExamSoft. I'd like to welcome everyone to our webinar today entitled Using Exam Analytics to Evaluate Student Use of Lecture Capture Recordings, hosted by Dan Thompson, Manager of Instructional Design and Educational Technology, Oklahoma State University Center for Health Sciences. Before I introduce Dan, I would like to just add this disclaimer that I have a long history of mispronouncing the word podiatric. So I'm going to do my best to read his bio without mispronouncing the word again and embarrassing myself. So here we go. Dan currently assists faculty at Oklahoma State University Center for Health Sciences in course design and development, while also introducing new methods of utilizing educational technology in the curriculum to create learner-centered environment. Additionally, he instructs faculty in implementing appropriate assessments and the use of sound pedagogical strategies in and across the curriculum. He holds a Master of Science in Technology Enhanced Learning and a Bachelor of Science in Adolescent Young Adult Education from the University of Dayton. His background includes serving as Education Innovations and Learning Design Manager at Kent State University College of Podiatric Medicine, where he assisted with the implementation of active learning principles in preparation for a curricular change. He also taught at the secondary level and assisted faculty in course design at the Ohio College of Podiatric Medicine. Before we begin, I have just a couple of housekeeping items to go over. If you have specific questions throughout the presentation, we encourage everyone to type them to the questions feature of the GoToWebinar control panel, which should be on the right-hand side of your screen at any time throughout the presentation. We'll have a chance to answer all questions at the conclusion of the webinar. Also, at the conclusion of the webinar, you should have a quick survey pop up for you. We encourage everyone, if at all possible, to fill the survey out. It's only 5 questions. It'll only take you about 30 seconds, and we use all of that feedback to enhance presentations going forward, so we would really appreciate you taking the time to fill that out. If you're interested in viewing past webinars or registering for upcoming webinars, you can view an entire list with descriptions at resources.examsoft.com, and then by clicking on the upcoming or on-demand webinars drop down at the top of the page. Quick reminder, early adopter registration is now open for the 3rd annual ExamSoft Assessment Conference, EAC, which is going to be held June 14th through 16th in Denver, Colorado. The discounted rates that are available now are only good through March 31st. So make sure you get those booked if you're interested in coming. More information on the event and registration can be found at assessmentconference.com. Today's webinar is being recorded, and all attendees and registrants will receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording in the next few days. Usually it takes us about 48 hours to get that out. Please feel free to share that with your peers or colleagues as you would like. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hand everything over to Dan. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon, and enjoy the webinar.
Thanks, Stephanie. This isn't nearly as fun when you don't mess up reading my bio. So, but I guess I'll participate anyway. And I guess I'll change my bio now. I've only left it like that just because I know that you usually say podiatric instead of podiatric, and I just want to slip that in. Anyway, everyone, thanks for joining me today. I'm talking about a topic that we're working on quite a bit here at OSU, and it's something that we're really excited about, and we're in the preliminary stages right now, and that's what I'll talk about. I'll get to my agenda here in a moment. But it's a study that the more that we learn about and look through our results, the more we are really encouraged by what we're seeing, and we're continuing to grow more and more, really on a daily basis. So with that, I'm just going to go through my agenda real quick, and then I'll jump right in. This won't be too long of a webinar today. Don't worry. I won't drone on and on because that's just as boring as for me as it is for everyone listening. So anyway, quick agenda. We're going to jump into, and I'll go through the background of our school. I'll explain our process. The presentation is really process heavy. I just want to make sure that I get through that really well and explain exactly what we're doing and how we're doing it. Hopefully that will be useful to anyone looking to implement something like this. I'll talk about our roles, the players, and who makes this happen here at OSU. And we'll just go through the results and what we're learning from those results, and then how we're going to move forward. Just to jump into the objectives, 3 pretty simple objectives. Hopefully all participants after today or after viewing the recorded version of this will be able to create a process similar to this to review student usage of lecture capture at your institution. Also, obviously the goal of doing that is to be able to recognize the relationship between student usage and their performance on assessments. Obviously, we want to make sure everything we do with our students, especially as far as ed tech is concerned, is value added. So I'm just going to speak to that a little bit. And then finally, one thing that we've learned ourselves throughout this process is how to apply the lessons learned to establish reviews of other ed tech programs. So really the process that I'll talk about today can really be very easily applied to almost any process, whether it's specifically I'm going to speak about educational and technology programs and learning or lecture capture, but it really can be instituted to evaluate any process. It's really about using the exam stats to just to make sure that what you're doing is value added and doing what we all want to do and increase student outcomes. For us at the med school, that's usually seen through eventually in board scores, but obviously we also want students to perform well in our courses. So just quick background about our school here at Oklahoma State University Center for Health Sciences in sunny Tulsa, Oklahoma. We are an osteopathic medical school with a systems-based curriculum, so it's body systems. And so we have foundational courses, first year fall courses, and those are just biomedical sciences. And then the rest are our next 3 semesters are pretty heavily loaded with systems-based courses. Both our first and second year courses have approximately 115 students or so, so we're dealing with pretty large class size. So being able to get this type of feedback is always valuable for us because when we do different types of instructional techniques in class, having 115 students is great. It provides us a lot of data, but it's also it's pretty high stakes with that many students and with it being med ed. And then finally, how we use lecture capture. So all of our in-class recordings are captured here at OSU. We post them typically same day. Usually they're posted within the hour, but at the latest we try to get them posted by end of business. Obviously, sometimes technology gets in the way, but I'm pretty confident we do this at about a 99% rate. And then we also have faculty members create recordings from their desk, home office, wherever. And this can be in a multitude of ways, and I'll touch on that. And that's whether they're going to flip the classroom or if they just want to do a little addendum video to a lecture that happened in class, or sometimes we'll even answer student emails with videos if we have a lot of students asking similar questions. It's just a way to inform them in math and not lose any of that information kind of lost in translation, because we know that people anymore aren't that great about reading emails, especially students. I think if you get beyond like 3 lines, you're not going to get it read. For me, it's like a line and a half, and I usually bow out there and just kind of assume what the rest of it's going to say. I probably shouldn't have admitted that on something that's being recorded. So anyway, getting to our study and our process, we had 2 big questions that we wanted to learn, and this is what really was what got us our start with this study. So we want to know, we know lecture capture is widely used. We have we've used 2 different lecture capture programs since I've been here at OSU, and I have experience with other programs, and all of them give you student statistics, who watched it, when they watched it, how long they watched it, et cetera. So we knew from looking at those stats that our students use lecture capture quite a bit, but we wanted to see if we could find any relationship between the quantity of views and their assessment scores. So we just wanted to see if it was adding value. And then we also want to see if we could identify a successful method of utilizing lecture capture as an instructional and study tool. So this study isn't just it's not an evaluation of lecture capture as far as do we want to keep it or not. We have the program, we're going to keep it, we know students use it. We just want to see if it was adding value, and if there's ways that we could encourage students to use it, if we could find trends that their classmates or that previous classes have used it that have led to successful study tools habits and help them do better on exams. And I also touched on question 2 there, the instructional aspect. So we wanted to explore if we can use lecture capture more as an instructional tool and not just kind of like an instant replay of class. We know, we're very well aware if you just have a lecture that can be, that can be very easily replaced by the video, and oftentimes, we'll see that happen with students. So we just wanted to see if we could use it in a different method, and that would increase outcomes. So that's really the whole point behind all of what I'm going to speak about today, and what we have going on moving forward. So it's actually a pretty simple process that we have implemented here. Whenever we look at how we can evaluate any program, obviously lecture capture in this case, we immediately go to our assessment stats. So we use all the stats that ExamSoft provides and the category process specifically to really go in depth to find, what are we doing in class and how is it adding value. So with this process specifically, we mapped each of our exam items from every exam to the lecture that those questions were written from. So, for example, if we had an exam that covered 10 lectures and it's a 50-question exam, there's 5 questions from each lecture, we mapped those, 5 questions lecture 1, 5 questions lecture 2, 5 questions lecture 3, and so forth and so on. And that so we were able to get stats specifically on how students did on questions that just came from those lectures. And that's how we were able to tie that specifically to the lecture capture views for that session. We just, we have the one, our classes are typically 50 minutes. So we have the 50-minute videos and all of the views that came from that. And then we have all the questions that came from that same session. And we link those together. So since this is our preliminary study that I'm talking about today, that's quite literally what we're looking at is just number of views and to see if there is some relationship there. If we can see anything that stands out, find trends. It was just really a way to kind of get this kick started. So, I'm not going to go through all of the spreadsheets that we have with this because it's quite boring and kind of confusing. But we compared the student exam performance with the lecture views. I'll get into a chart in a couple slides here, and I'll kind of show just some basic stats that we have that are, again, providing the foundation for the study. But in comparing those, again, we learned a lot about it, and we also run into a lot of unintended findings that we had that we're really excited about that weren't a part of the study, but it really allowed us to learn a lot more, not just about the lecture capture process, but the more that we just review these exam stats, we were able to see more and more what we're doing in the classroom and how it's leading to student success or how we can improve upon certain aspects and lead to student success. So, I mentioned that we categorized each question by lectures. This is just a screenshot that I blew up of our category structure. So this is of a course. You can see there we went through and just made lecture 1, lecture 2, lecture 3, so forth and so on with the name. So we use, when we work with faculty members, and actually the next slide I'll talk about the roles of folks that participate in this. But when we work with faculty members, we just try to number things as much as possible to make it easier because we're working with non-content experts and content experts. So if we had a faculty member, for example, I'm not a content expert on many things at all, but especially not in medical education, or on medicine. So if we have a faculty member that try to communicate with me in any of these subjects that you see on the screen, if we were concerned that we'd have something slip through the cracks or be confused, doing the number system is just a way that makes it very simple. So if, I don't know, Dr. Smith gives me, 10 questions and they can very easily just write down, lecture 1 next to question 1 and lecture 4 next to question 2. And then we're able to manually categorize those for them. So this is done all after the questions are actually put into the system. We get the exam squared away and posted for students, and then we add this after the exam has already been created. So it's kind of secondary to the exam creation process that we do this, because obviously we want the exams to go off without a hitch, and we don't want to have to worry about categorization when we're actually establishing the exams. So in this process, it does take a little bit of a group to do this. We actually have a department. We have an instructional design and ed tech group of 4 of us, and then we have 2 academic assistants that participate in this process. So each of our courses actually has an instructional designer and an academic support staff individual assigned to that course. And so between the instructional designer, the support staff, and the faculty, we work together to create this process and to get it put into ExamSoft appropriately. So the instructional design staff and the support staff does creates the item categorization. All of those items you saw on this page, that's something I created in there. One neat thing that makes it easier is that it does copy and paste really well into there when you create the categories, so at least there isn't too much typing. Otherwise, I'd have a lot of typos in the medical terms. It's also our group, the instructional design group, that pulls the lecture capture statistics. And it's literally just something we just export into an Excel file, which is nice that we have that in Excel. I guess one important piece to add is when we pull those views, we eliminate anything that's under 1 minute. We have a lot where students would click on it and click off quickly, or maybe it was an error, or maybe they had some sort of tech error with it. So we scrapped those because we didn't want those to count as hits when they literally just for 8 seconds. But we did actually do some testing ourselves within there and found that a minute actually was time to open, navigate to where you wanted, and listen enough to pick up some facts. So when we have students that view it anywhere from a minute or so to the full 50 or 60 minutes. So it's also our group that pulls the exam statistics. Again, we do all the categorizing in the actual system. We maybe have 1 or 2 faculty members that categorize. If you do have an instructional design type staff or faculty support staff, I would strongly suggest that you have those be the folks that create the category structure for a study like this or any study, and not have the faculty do that, just because it's a lot on the plate for faculty members to learn the different ed tech programs, and it's also a lot of cooks in the kitchen. So we noticed when we had more faculty members being involved in it that they were categorizing differently, or kind of making the structure in there almost in different languages. So this way we worked as a department to develop one common language within our categories to set up the study, so we know that the results that we're getting are from the data that we actually do want to pull, and we're sure of it. So the faculty's role in this, obviously they're the ones writing the questions. I know I didn't put that note there. But they also help with the item and categorization. It's just the fact of the matter in med ed, our support staff, we don't have medical backgrounds. So as non-content experts, we need the help of the faculty members to be able to do that. We provide this in a couple of different options for faculty members. I'll email them their questions. I'll export them from ExamSoft to a Word document, and I'll send them to them, and some of them will do it electronically. Some I'll print them off, and I'll go to their office and have them mark them down really quick for me. And since the categorizing process with something like this is a manual process, it really doesn't matter if it's on paper or if it's on done digitally. So really whatever's easiest for the faculty member. Obviously we try to do that just to help build the study out, but also that just increases buy-in if we can make it as easy and efficient time-wise for our faculty members. That really helps encourage their support and their participation in this. So jumping into the results of this baseline study that we had, again, and we're looking at is watching these videos, and we're looking solely at views in this point. Are we seeing that more views equal higher exam scores? And so the chart that I have here on the left column that I have most watched recording and least watched recording, that's literally the most watched is the top half, top 50% of recordings, and the least watched is the bottom 50%. It was tough to make this a number, a specific number range, because with the different classes, some classes, some courses had 40, 50, 60, 70 views per video, while others maybe other courses only had 25 or so views per video. It really was content specific. So that's why I went with the percentage, and I just split it in half just because I wanted to really get like a big picture view here and not nuance it out quite yet. So we're not there, and we have some other elements to the study that we want to add going forward. So the overall results were kind of what we expected, not overly stunning. That the videos that were watched more, students performed about 2.5% better on questions that came from those items. So since that didn't jump out too much, I broke it down into looking at our foundational courses versus our systems courses. So in our curriculum, the foundational courses, it's just foundational material across the whole course for the most part. So it's really materials that's setting them up for when they get into their more clinical-based courses. So the information in that, whether it's in Lecture 1 or Lecture 18, is pretty flat foundational across the whole course. So when we looked at that, where the information doesn't always technically scaffold so much like you see where they have to apply it in our more clinical courses, that it did have a bigger difference in the relationship between student views and student performance on exams. So we saw a 4% increase on the videos that are being watched more in those foundational courses, where it's only a 1% in the systems courses. And so I mentioned previously the unintentional findings, and I think that's 2 or 3 slides in the presentation from now. But just kind of jumping ahead a little bit, this wasn't part of the initial study to separate these courses out. We really just wanted to look at it curricular-wide. But once we got the results and we started to notice that the content of these different courses were so greatly different as far as the difficulty level and what we're asking students to do with the information. The foundational stuff is really just recall for the most part, whereas when they get further into their clinical courses, we're asking them to apply information in clinical settings. So it's obviously we're asking them to do much more there. So we've kind of learned, and I know I am getting ahead of myself, but we kind of learned that we have to evaluate our curriculum by course in a different way to actually look at the content within the course, and we can't just take this big, topographical view of the whole curriculum and just evaluate it. But it really matters year by year and even semester by semester and course by course how we evaluate it. But we are encouraged to see, obviously, if you have an ed tech program you implement, if you can find a positive relationship between students using that program and student performance, then obviously that's it's money well spent. So we are happy to see this initial relationship. At the bottom there, I had that last row of TBL, team-based learning. We noticed in our systems courses that we had a faculty member that actually didn't live lecture at all, and they actually recorded all of their lectures from their office here on campus, and we actually live streamed a lecture as well. But everything was done, just through all lectures were via recording on lecture capture, and then class time. Some classes that was in lieu of class at all, and some of the class times that remained were actually used just for team-based learning. And so we noticed that replacing the live lecture with the recorded lecture, and they were shorter lectures, they weren't the full 50, 60 minutes, but replacing those with the recorded lecture and then adding some active learning in the class jumped their scores quite a bit. We found quite a positive relationship there. So, we're starting to see that it isn't necessarily the use of the lecture capture, whether or not they use it, but how it's used. And so that's, kind of something that's setting up a future study. But it also has some impact on how, what we're doing today. So I guess, here's the written format of what I just said for the most part. But again, we did find a consistent positive relationship between quantity of student views and their performance on summative exams. I didn't include the nuanced lecture by lecture stats just because it would have been too many pages to put in there, but it was pretty consistent across the board, unless there was a really, really difficult content, traditionally difficult content in a course or in a lecture that students watch that video a lot, but the content's so traditionally difficult that they struggled anyway. There were outliers like that. But unless there's something like that, we saw, again, the more views, the higher the student performance. The unique thing with this is that we actually noticed that students were viewing at the beginning of the semester a little bit more than or the beginning of the course more than later in the course. And that was true in both our systems and our foundational courses. So even though the content should be consumed differently by students, they were consuming it the same methods. So that's something else we want to look at, is how we can encourage students to, maybe study differently based on the content and the difficulty of the content, not always, have the same behavior, whether it's a systems-based course or a easy foundational course. Easy, like I know what any of it means. Yeah, but I guess we'll say, one of the building block courses here. So also the results that I mentioned in the bottom TBL is that, the exam stats proved us that we had students performing better when we were actually using our lecture capture as a tool and not just as a replay. So that wasn't necessarily set out of this. We kind of fell into that a little bit when we were going through some of the research on this. But it was very encouraging to see, especially as an instructional design staff, that using those exam results and nuancing where the questions came from, we're able to encourage students to use this product a certain way. And again, also, and this is true of any product that you may use, but in this case, obviously, we're looking at the lecture capture. We also found out that more specific information is needed. We understand that this is a very basic study at this time. We didn't really want to get into the depths of a long, drawn-out study, only to find that we're kind of spinning our tires. So we're just kind of taking it step by step, and as we do that, it's really helping us build the study in a way that's really useful and specific to our school. So I'll end the presentation today just kind of talking about what we have going on next. So unintended lessons, I've kind of hinted at this a few times. We realize the more and more, we continually do evaluation of exam stats here at OSU. There's any way that we can try and get more information out of student performance, the learning materials we create, the instructional methods we use, the study tools students use. The more information that we have, the better we can employ those tactics in class to help improve student outcomes. I mentioned this at the beginning, but at the end of the day, that's why we're all here, is to help improve student outcomes and make the program as valuable as possible for those students. So, but as we go through these different studies, we always have these unintended lessons that we just kind of luck into, or they bring up new questions, and we get on these other studies, and we learn a lot. And so with this, I mentioned it before, we're just kind of interested to see why students are viewing. Typically, they view recordings more from the beginning of the course. It could be something as simple as there's more days to review the one, at the beginning, because there's just more time to view that one. But we did notice that even those ones, the views were spiking more right before the exam. So it's not like they were viewing them consistently each day as they built up to the exam. Just like any typical students, studying more, obviously, the days leading up, or not more, most, the days leading up to the exam. So we just want to see why that is. Is it because of timing? Is it because they're further removed from that information? But we also want to make sure that we encourage students not to overlook the recent material they've had and not to assume that they're going to be able to recall it easier just because it happened more recently. Because, as I was saying a few slides ago, we do see that relationship between use of lecture capture views and student performance. So we do want to encourage students, hey, don't forget about the more recent stuff. And so hopefully as we build these stats out and get some really concrete stats to share with students, we'll do that so we can help their study methods. We gained insight on our course evaluation process. And this just kind of goes back to the idea that content within courses is different. It's not, for the respiratory system, not all the content in there is created equal. Some is more foundational in there, some is very difficult where students have to apply the information, and everything in between. So it's really helped us to nuance how we look at that process when we evaluate our exam performance. And then finally, it's encouraged us to review our instructional methods and how we employ them in class, and specific to lecture capture, how we actually use it. It's one thing that comes from our department quite often, is that we want to use lecture capture as a tool, and taking these exam stats, we're able to show our faculty members, hey, this isn't just some neat idea that Dan came up with that you should use lecture capture this way, but here's some actual hard data that is proving that when you use it this way, it improves student results. So, and we've started to investigate that more and more since that's a hot button item in our department of educational development. We're constantly looking at improving teaching and learning. So that was something that really jumped out to us that we're really excited to share with our faculty members and encourage them to be more active with the way that they use these products. So current implications, we're down to the final couple slides. I'm just going to really talk about how we're using this now, even just at the beginning of the study, and then what we're doing going forward. And then we should hopefully have time for some questions. So right now it is affecting our faculty development. I actually just did faculty development in-house here yesterday, talking about our lecture capture program and how to use it actively as a learning method and not just a replay of class. So we do want our students being as active as possible, and so and even though lecture capture is typically a pretty passive process, we're trying to identify ways that our faculty members to make that a more active process. Again, because we're learning from the way that we categorize these items that's leading to student success. So improving upon this study, we have a number of ways that we're looking to improve upon this study. We are adding an attendance element to it. So we do have our students currently participating in this study and indicating for us we don't have mandatory attendance here at our school. So we're currently taking attendance for the sake of this study to see how students are using the lecture capture. Are they coming to class and using it to review? Are they just consuming the information with lecture capture, not coming to lecture the in-class lecture at all? Are they, and so we have a number of different categories that we're looking at with that as well. That we're really encouraged that so far. We've just got our first round of data back with that. And we're also using, this has helped us to use exam stats to review other processes as well. So whether you're using, I don't know, clickers or different teaching methods in class, whatever it might be, any ed tech program, we realize that the lessons learned from this and the category structure that we made in ExamSoft to review what happened just from those lecture periods is telling us a lot about how we're teaching, how our students are using our lecture capture. It's just providing a whole lot of insight, more so than just lecture capture. So that's been a really big, we've been really encouraged with that as well, because it's once you get that structure set up and that structure by lecture, that's so far we've categorized by a myriad of methods and try to get a lot of different exam analytics through our category structure. And we realized doing that by lecture has probably been the most telling as far as what's happening in class, what's happening with lecture capture, what's happening with our EdTech tools, and is it leading to student success. If anyone's wondering, no, we don't use this as a review of faculty. It's not a faculty performance by any means. It's just as far as, with this one specifically, how we're using our lecture capture, how we can encourage students to use our lecture capture. And then when we talk about teaching methods, it's really just about the method. We want to make sure that we use the appropriate teaching methods for OSU and our students. So we don't do any formal evaluations of faculty with that. So again, moving forward, we're going to include student attendance on this study. We're going to actually add formative assessment with our lecture capture. I mentioned previously making that more of an active learning environment, even if they're at home on the couch with a bowl of Cheerios watching their lecture, that they actually have to stop and answer the occasional question and be clued into what they're being able to self-assess and see if they're actually on the right path with the content. So we're going to review that to see if that process is adding value to the process. And when I've said this a lot throughout the last half hour or so, that we're going to review that process, or that we're going to look into that further. When I say that, I quite literally mean that we're going to take all of the lecture videos, or all the lecture exam items that come from those videos, and we're going to categorize them with that lecture period and with that video together, and then review those exam stats to see if adding formative assessment, if students come into class, whatever it might be, if that's improving their exam stats. That's the best way to evaluate here is to review those exam statistics. And I know from being in a couple different higher ed institutions that it's very easy to, especially when you're working with students and getting student feedback and having course evaluations, it's very easy to make decisions based on observational data or qualitative data. But this is the best way that we found to actually have quantitative data to make an exam analytics and data-driven decision. Even if it's something that's not really, students aren't wild about, if it's something that is leading to improved outcomes and they're doing better on our exams and they're doing better on our boards, and that's our bottom line, and that's what we're concerned about. We're looking at performance by discipline. So within each of our courses, again, I mentioned we have different content areas so within our systems courses. So we're going to break those down by discipline with the understanding that some require students to apply information more and think at a higher level. So we're going to be cognizant of that. And then we're going to compare with student performance data prior to lecture capture. We instituted lecture capture, I want to say 2013, maybe 14. I think it's 2014 across the board. So we do have exam data in ExamSoft from prior to that time. So we just want to see if what value lecture capture is adding to that process as well. So not just views with our current students, but putting in comparison with the study habits of our previous students. So with that, I am done with my talking portion of this. If there are any questions, I'm more than happy to take them at this time. And if you have questions that you think of later, feel free to contact me on the email and screen there. I'm more than happy to kind of have a dialogue about this. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dan. we're going to go ahead and open the floor up for a quick Q&A session. If anybody has questions, now is the time to type them into the questions area of the GoToWebinar control panel. Should be on the right-hand side of your screen. If you type them in, I will read them out loud and give Dan an opportunity to answer. We already have a couple of that have come in. Dan, I'm going to go ahead and jump right in if that's okay.
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, first question is, how many courses were included in this study and over what length of time?
Great question. So we actually just started using this lecture capture product in August. So we've done, the study that I had here was, it's 8 courses, and it was starting in August, and actually the study went up until Monday. What's the last exam stats that I pulled and added to this? So what's that, 6 months maybe?
Okay, next question is, did lecture recording links have any effect on student consumption and or assessment scores?
We don't have the data yet on the assessment scores based on the length of the videos. We have noticed that, this is probably no surprise, but the shorter videos were being consumed by students more completely. So, for example, the ones that I mentioned that our faculty member didn't actually live lecture in the classroom, but created videos from their office, those were shorter, and those were consumed all the way through more often. I didn't touch on this, but when we go through and we create we pull all the statistics from our lecture capture program to add and compare with our exam stats, we do take an average time watched. For the most part, that's pretty consistent with, most of our classes do go the full 50 minutes, and for the most part, the average time watched is right in there, about 38 to 42 minutes. So it's student consumption is pretty much the same across the board, except when we get to those videos that are 20 minutes or less. Those are the ones that we're noticing that we are getting a higher rate where students are watching the averages up all the way near a full 20 minutes with that.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, do you have any type of hypothesis on whether student attendance or how student attendance will play out into the lecture views and performance?
That's a really good question. I do. Personally, it's my hypothesis with that is that we're going to find that student attendance does not have any effect on the student scores. I'm going to guess that the students that attended and used lecture capture as a study tool, and the students that did not attend lecture and then used the lecture capture to consume the information and study will score around the same range, especially if it's a lecture-based class. So I think that we'll see that the attendance in the sessions where there was active learning involved and students were actually having time to practice the skill and apply what they've learned from the lecture in the class, I think attendance will have an effect there because students are having a chance to actually practice the skill with the faculty member present, and they're able to apply the knowledge again with the faculty member present and work in groups and have a group think with their peers. But if it's just straight lecture, I really do think that we're not going to see much of an effect of attendance in class.
Okay, next question. Are you able to compare the variable speed students use to watch a video?
Yeah, that's a great question. Our system does not tell us the speed at which a student watches. However, it does take that into consideration in the reports. So if it's a 40-minute lecture and a student watches at double time, but they happen to watch all the lecture content, it will say they watched for 40 minutes. It won't say they just watched for 20 minutes. One thing that beyond the next study of looking at attendance and even looking at the formative assessment. Some that's further down the road is looking at, we get a heat map from each lecture recording, and so we can see the specific parts of the recording that students are watching the most. So looking at the content that's presented during those times that students are watching the most is something we'd like to look at. And that it shows us that, but it doesn't indicate if they watched it double time or half speed or whatever during that time. It just shows the actual quantity of hits.
Okay, next question. Is the capture generic, or can you see the specific student viewing at specific intervals?
That's a great question. We can see who viewed it, when, how long, time of day. It tells us everything. So in our study with student attendance, obviously that's a completely anonymous study with our students as far as how we're going to release the results. But we are, in the system we do see who views it, when they do it, how many times. Absolutely.
Next question. Based on the performance scores and lecture consumption data, are you making any curricular or instructional changes?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm going to flip back a couple slides and just say that we have already, in reviewing some of that data as a department, we've started to change, I don't say change, we've started to emphasize these statistics in our faculty developments to work with faculty and making this a more active process, learning process with students. I'm actually, we're really excited and really proud. We just did a faculty development session yesterday, like I said, and we have a faculty member today that's been implementing formative assessments with our lecture capture recordings that are happening in class today. So immediately, yeah, we are making changes in instructional technique. Curricular-wide, not quite yet. I think after we get through the bulk of the study and the little parts that we want to add on, that's a possibility. It's not necessarily the intent to do that on a curricular-wide basis, but if there is something that stands out that is warranted, we most certainly will address that.
Okay, looks like this is maybe the last question. Did you compare the top performers to the lower performers on exams?
Oh, that's a great question too. That's part of our attendance study. We're going to look into that a little bit more as far as who ExamSoft provides what the top 27% performers and bottom 27% performers. So we're going to look into that. And the issue that we've been having in setting up that study is that we're trying to find the right balance as far as, are the students that are viewing it more, are those the students that are already typically higher performing students and are just more intrinsically motivated and therefore are studying more often, or is it something where it's something where we can truly say that this students utilizing lecture capture is improving their performance? Is there a student that typically was, I don't know, an 83% performer across the board, and then their average is raised to 88%? So that's something we kind of want to look at, and we're going to have to look at longitudinally, I think, as well, to see if we can show not just student performance on these exams by, if they're typically strong performers or not, but if we can actually see a value-added process longitudinally throughout their 2 years in our curriculum. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we do want to look back at before lecture capture to see if we can establish a really solid baseline of student performance historically, and then we'll look at each individual longitudinally throughout our curriculum. Those are great questions. Thanks.
Fantastic. That is all the questions that we have had come in. Thank you so much for your presentation, Dan. Thank you to everybody for being here this afternoon. We realize it's a busy time of year, so we appreciate your attendance. Just as a reminder, when you close out of the GoToWebinar control panel, you will get a quick survey that will pop up for you. We would really appreciate everybody taking the couple of seconds to fill out that five-question survey. As a reminder, this webinar has been recorded, and everybody will receive a email within the next 48 hours with a link to the recording as well as a PDF version of the slide deck. Feel free to view and share those as you would like. Dan's contact information is on the screen in front of you now, but if you have any questions for ExamSoft, we can be reached at info@examsoft.com. Thank you so much for your time today, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks, everybody.